The giant blade piercing Elbaph, the colossal skull of Onigashima and its katana located in Wano, massive steel gates that tower over the skyline known as the Gates of Justice, and now a castle built into the side of a truly titanic harp located in Hesperia Kingdom. I do not think that these are coincidences or like little aesthetic decorations. For years now, I've thought that the One Piece world did not belong to humanity at first. Something I actually proposed before we ever even learned about the first and second One Piece world. This harp here though, this thing feels like what I've been waiting for a long time. And so I think it's finally time to revisit and then flesh out an idea that will change the scale of One Piece forever when they finally return to slay Emu. This is Titan Piece 2.0. Here we go again. And I do want to first kick things off here by breaking down the massive harp revealed in Hesperia Kingdom, since it's the most recent and relevant addition to the theory, but also because I think it helps glue together the idea that before the age of the sun, forest, and sea god, there was also a titanic godly civilization. Now at first, I genuinely did not think about this harp as anything other than a fun little detail by Oda, like classic Oda, castle with a harp, that's a fun detail for a music kingdom to have. At least that's what I thought until I read a comment from a fan on my first Hesperia and Brook video from last week's chapter. So shout out to you, Moody CZ, because they are absolutely right. It is wild that I didn't see a big giant object and immediately connected to Titans. But now, thanks to you, I have, and I absolutely love it. I definitely think that this harp could be the remnant of a colossal bard of some kind, spreading joy and whimsy and music wherever he goes. I mean, you know what they say about a man with a big harp? Big fingers. That's right. So why do I think that at some point before everything we know happened in One Piece, there was a civilization of giant things? Well, because not only do we see it with ancient stuff, but like, I don't know, man, we see it with non-ancient stuff all the time. Gigantic beasts are a classic part of One Piece. Gigantic sea kings and Zunisha that have lived for thousands of years in the current era and are just these intelligent beings. And you're going to tell me that the giant artifacts and remains sprinkled across the entire globe we see don't imply that before the likes of Sea Kings and Big Z, another giant set of folks could also have existed? But the harp is really what is tying everything together for me, because music, of course, is not only one of the biggest things in One Piece, it's also a societal through line. Something that shows that a nation or a group actually existed, creating art, music, and joy. Because, in all fairness, a giant skull could just be a super big monster, that giant sword could just be symbolic, I guess, but the harp now really shows us that there was a culture beyond just war and bloodshed here. Hold on though, actually, you know what? I kind of feel like I'm already getting ahead of myself here a little bit. Sorry about that. Just because I know Titan Piece so well does of course not mean that you know what I'm talking about. After all, the ages of One Piece mega theory videos are now well over a year old, and while I do bring it up here and there in like other contexts, you might not be fully on board with what I'm talking about. And that's totally reasonable, so let me kind of catch you up here. This all starts with the idea that Nika is a Lunarian and that we know that the planet has existed for a really long time and it's got a lot of really old and weirdly big things on it. This part is very straightforward to explain. Arubana, the castle of Alabasta, has been around for 4,000 years plus. Ohara's tree was over 5,000 years old. The Atom Tree, and presumably then also the Eve Tree, kind of feels like they come as a pair, are also these ancient, massive trees. Then we have the giant robot facility that's even huge by giant standards on the Atom Tree from over 3,000 years ago. And then, of course, there are all these aforementioned giant weapons and skulls and artifacts scattered throughout the entire One Piece world. Onigashima, the tree sword of Elbaph, etc, etc. While originally I think we all just kind of expected that these were just like weird, funny, cool details that added like this fantasy, like pretext to One Piece, I now for a while have believed that Oda actually put these things in for a reason, to show us what the first world was actually like. A place full of titans, beings of immense scale that wandered the planet long ago. Think about it kind of like a video game. This is pretty much peak environmental storytelling. Oda likes to show things very early on and then tell us why way later. After all, on Skypiea, we saw imagery of giant ancient snake gods and stuff, and then thousands of chapters later, we learn of them being actual real things. Massive primordial beings who may have originally ruled the blue planet before the rise of the current world order. They're gone now, but surely, if they were that big, something must remain, right? And well, yeah, we do know that there are current descendants of ancient races who worship these exact gods and titans. Funnily enough, because a cover story revealed it, we do know that at some point, the sky races, the three of them that we know of, the Shandians, the Skypians, and the Birkins, they all descended to live on the blue planet because they ran out of resources on the moon. This was shown to us in Enel's cover story. But very suspiciously, the Lunarians were not depicted here. Why though? Why would they not be from the moon? It is literally in their name. Lunar, moon, Lunarian, sky rays, like it all should line up, and yet it doesn't. Which is actually why I proposed a while ago in my Titan Piece theory that the original era of One Piece was centered around the idea that the Lunarians were the original sky rays from the moon and that Nika was one of them who came down way earlier. He might have come down to plant or harvest, kind of unclear at the time, the giant trees spread throughout the One Piece world, and in an effort to terraform the planet, he brought the ancient weapons, objects of immense power named after gods capable of raising the seas, destroying mountains, and all that fun jazz. And I actually came to this conclusion because the earth, sun, rain, and forest god are all kind of tied to agriculture and, the resources necessary for plant life to grow, aka the very big trees we have. And the other thing here that helped me connect that there was a first world of One Piece before we got the reveal was the name of the ancient weapons itself, which in Japanese truly use the word ancient, Kodai Heiki, right? The ancient weapons in their name. Now in the series, we kind of tend to call the Void Century Kingdom the Ancient Kingdom in English as well because of the translation and kind of like the community vibe overall, but that's actually not accurate at all. It's technically the Kyodai Okoku, the Great Kingdom, which is very much separate from how the weapons are titled, which actually are ancient weapons. So it's always seemed fairly clear to me that these things seem to predate the Void Century, belonging probably to the first world, if not earlier than that. So in a nutshell, that was my original theory, and then like a bolt of lightning, literally like a couple of weeks later, Oda dropped chapter 1138, where we finally learned about the first world, where Nika clashed with a giant serpent to end the first era, all centered on this massive tree in the middle of the mural. As you can imagine, when that happened, I felt pretty vindicated, but I still couldn't place everything. But now, with the reveals of Nidhogg, Dozan, Zaza, the massive harp, I do think we might finally be able to crack it, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe, and it's an idea, I could be wrong, but maybe what if the new dawn is bringing about the return of the first world by now ending the third world, going from the rule of the Titans to the rule of the gods to the rule of humans back to the Titans. We've been so focused on gods and goddesses bringing together the sun god or something else like that, or who knows what, but we might have just been off base completely. What if instead the story of One Piece is not actually about the return of the gods, but instead the return of the Titans? And to explain that, we need to first explain, of course, what the Titans actually were, specifically in Greek mythology, the place that it's very obvious Oda is pulling a lot of this from. Uranus, Pluton, right? We have Ares and all these like godly names that we've been getting throughout Elbaph. What's so interesting about the Titans in myth is that they are not usually treated as a separate race from the gods. For the Greeks, the Titans are also divine godly beings. The difference is really pretty much generational. Titans belong to an older and ancient order of the world that then later gets overthrown by the younger gods like Zeus and the Olympians. The Titan Kronos kills his daddy, and then the Titans were in charge of Olympus, his generation, and then his sons killed him in return and took over Olympus, and they then became the Greek gods. Now, I actually find this part super interesting, not because I think that the Titans and the gods in One Piece are all one big race necessarily, but I do think it's important to discuss the generational side of things here. It's why I say Titans, because they were there first. They were before the gods, and I think that's exactly what Oda has been going for here. The first world may have just belonged to beings like the Nidhogg, the Hellflame Serpent, ancient colossal rulers, and perhaps even Nika himself before history then transformed him from a Titan into a god. And I honestly don't think that that's too crazy to assert at this point. Like, whether Nika was a godly figure who then sided with the Titans, or he himself was a Titan that was part of all of this, I think it could very well explain why the Harley text keeps putting quotes around the sun god. Sometimes I kind of use this point to actually say that he might have been not the sun, but the moon god, and I sure as hell would have in the original Titan Piece video had the Harley existed at the time. You know, the idea that he comes from the moon and all of that. But really, thinking about it right now, there's also a chance that Oda may have subtly been implying that Nika was not originally viewed as a god at all. Instead, he may have been something much older, a Titan. Or perhaps more accurately, a being from the Titan era who later then became titanified or deified or something of the sort. And if that's true, then the entire conflict of the first world changes completely. If Nika was a being from the first world that allied with the Titans, then suddenly Nika's title as a liberator makes a bunch of sense. After all, the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus and might need to get liberated. I also think that the Earth God, potentially a fellow Lunarian like Mu, is the bad boy here, and Nika is the good guy who rallied the Titans against him, a now god who betrayed his own kind, the people trying to terraform the One Piece world. This is also actually where our favorite Prometheus parallel to Nika becomes really interesting again, because in Greek mythology, Prometheus steals divine fire and gives it to humanity, fundamentally changing the balance between, humans and gods, and also civilization itself forever. He's originally a Titan who then betrayed his fellow Titans, realizing that the gods would just win, but then he later on also betrays the gods that he sided with by gifting the sacred fire to humanity. He disrupts the old order of the world by allowing mortals to now have access to something only reserved for higher divine beings. Now, let's compare that to the idea of the Forbidden Sun in One Piece. What if the fire of the first world was this power unleashed, a source of energy, power, or creation so powerful that it was controlled by the ancient rulers, like the Earth God who conquered the planet, or maybe originally the Titans before him? And what if Nika was the figure, the Lightbringer, who allowed ordinary races to access it? Suddenly, Nika becomes less of a traditional god and much more of a liberator figure, and his allegiances come into question. I guess I can pick a side here, say Nika was a Titan who betrayed them, or say that he was a god who betrayed the gods and went over to the Titans, but honestly I think it doesn't really matter. We can't answer that today, we still don't have enough to work with for Nika specifically, but we do know that Vegapunk has of course said that history is not black and white, though Flamingo has said that history is shaped by the victors, and Nika, for all we know, could have just been a chaotic third-party element in all of this. Liberation, as you know, isn't usually super peaceful, at least not in One Piece. It creates a lot of chaos. Just look at Luffy freeing any place. From another perspective, Nika may have caused the destruction of the first world, because in Elbaph legend, Nika is both a destroyer or a liberator. There's many unclear interpretations of this character that differ, as Saul tells us. He is not clear-cut at all, but I also keep saying them. The Titans. Do we actually know enough about them to actually pinpoint a few distinct actors here, Manu? Well, yes, I actually think so, and I want to talk about them now. So, who were these giant godly beings? Luckily, I think Oda may have already been showing us fragments of them throughout the entire story that help me separate who's who. No, not who's who the world government got. No, not who, not the owl. Who is who among the damn Titans is what, My God. I mean, God, I love you, Biblo, but you know, like, you gotta back off for now. All right, let's now go dig deep into the soil, the myths, the legends, and the ancient relics of One Piece and see how many titans we can maybe pinpoint here. And since this Asperia flashback we're currently in takes place, you know, on Elbaph, there's a couple here that I think are a pretty great place to start with. Nidhogg. The easiest figure for us to actually classify as a titan on Elbaph is probably Nidhogg. In Norse mythology, the Nidhogg gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil itself, feeding on corpses and slowly eroding the structure of the world until its end. We of course saw the giant black dragon on what appears to be the first world side of the mural. That's a titan if I've ever seen one. Hell, that's pretty much a kaiju. And let me tell you, that is not just a dragon. This is a primordial force, a titanic dragon that can only reach its true scale as a devil fruit when used by an ancient giant. Something that stands out to me because we know a user of this fruit from somewhere in the First or Second World period, but based on what we know about devil fruits, they seem to be based somehow on dreams and desires. I think it's pretty likely that the real Nidhogg was a titan and the war god of Elbaph used a devil fruit to mimic its power. I guess that he used to be way bigger himself and that over time the ancient giants are just getting smaller and smaller, and Loki of course just has ancient giant blood, isn't even really an ancient giant. The Titan logic also helps explain Imu's weird deal with maybe calling out Nika and Nidhogg, etc., and then distinctly separating them from Luffy and Loki. And if that's true, then devil fruits themselves may actually just be preserving fragments of the original Titans. Nidhogg may be the prime example of what the god's goal was, taking over the One Piece world after the Age of Titans. They came in, messed with these massive trees, and then got some sick fruit powers out of it. I personally definitely think that devil fruits must tie into the Adam and Eve tree somehow. Eve would be my personal favorite choice since Imu's castle is all about confirmed to rest on top of the Eve tree, and they're the devil fruit guy, and we haven't seen any devil fruits grow on the Adam tree yet. But thank you, Titan Nidhogg, for being almost pretty clean cut here. The Hellflame Serpent. Ah, yes, the Hellflame Serpent. How I wish you would have existed when I made the original Titan piece video. I think people would have believed me way more at the time if we already had that piece of information. But again, I do think that the mural paints a pretty great picture of why I think this bad boy must be a Titan. The Harley text describes flame, destruction, and catastrophe surrounding the ancient world, so naturally the question became, who controlled that fire and darkness? And the answer, pretty obviously to me at least, is this Titan right here. And honestly, I think that the Hellflame title matters a lot more than people might realize, because One Piece, especially over the last few arcs, has just repeatedly associated flames with divinity. The Mother Flame, Nika's sun imagery, and most recently, of course, Imu's omen, the Black Flames. Fire is growing increasingly spiritual, which kind of makes me wonder what a hell flame actually is and why it's separate from a normal flame. And I kind of wonder if this might not just be like a location thing, not necessarily an evil thing, because what if the Hellflame Serpent was not just an evil devil monster, but the guardian of the First World's legendary power source? The protector of the Forbidden Sun itself, kind of like the snake and the forbidden fruit. A giant titan who guarded or fended off evil so that it could not taint the blue planet's core or whatever or wherever the Forbidden Sun actually is. Which is of course why the Earth God, the first conqueror of the planet potentially it seems, had to claim it as their serpent of Hellflame so that they could actually access the divine power of the Forbidden Sun. Alrighty, this one is a classic Titan for me. The OG Titan from the Titan piece theory that I still think absolutely tracks. Because the skull at Onigashima may genuinely be one of the biggest clues in all of One Piece. Because that thing is not simply large, it is absurdly big and conveniently Oars-shaped, right? Same style of horns, the skulls on Oars' belt match it, but why do I think that there's another bigger Oars before the Thriller Bark Ancient Giant that, you know, at least Moria says is the original continent puller? Well, that's because his descendant, Little Oars Jr., is actually Oars III. That's what is on his flag at least, Oars 3. I think it just makes a lot of sense that the Oars from Thriller Bark is the second one. He does not look big enough to pull any continents, but I do think that the giant Onigashima skull absolutely works and would be Oars the first, the original guy. An island-sized skull with a gigantic katana, a swordsman, and the original member of the Oars clan who then eventually may have descended into other ancient giants like Oars, Herald, Loki, and Little Oars Jr. amongst others. But then shouldn't I be tying Oars to Elbaph, not Wano? Well, I mean, sure, at first because of Elbaph being the island of giants and the ancient giant bloodline being royal, that would be a pretty safe assumption, but we also know that giants do natively exist elsewhere outside of Elbaph in One Piece. And there's a really interesting outfit connection here that I think is really important. And yes, Outfit Analyzer Manu has returned, and once again, we are, just like with Zaza, talking about Japanese-style hats. As you know, Ace gifted Little Oars Jr. a kasa, a traditional Japanese straw hat that he learned to weave on Wano, which ties really nicely into the hat that Oars tries to wear when he's reanimated on Thriller Bark. I do think that Oars may genuinely have been a wandering swordsman, an ancient titan who wielded a katana and a kasa, eventually slain after pulling together Wano. Though of course, I must admit that Oars may just be looking for a hat because he's got Luffy's shadow specifically, but I do think that's a red herring. Unless of course maybe another theory that we talked about many years ago on this channel could be true, and Oars is literally like the original Oars was Nika, and that's why he behaves like Luffy, even though it's actually Luffy behaving like Oars, not the other way around. But you know, let's stick with the Titan thing for now. The title Continent Puller again could be another dead giveaway here because it always sounded very exaggerated at first, but through the lens of Titan Piece, it might have just been a literal thing. What if these beings, the ones like the original Oars on Wano, genuinely have reshaped the planet during the First World? What if the bizarre geography of One Piece is partially the result of titanic warfare? I mean, Wano itself is clearly a mix and match of a bunch of totally different islands and countries that just look like they were dragged together. The modern world's islands and weird climate issues may just be the aftermath of the First World's destruction, and that might explain everything. Adam of Elbaph. Of course, if we're gonna talk about the giant katana on Onigashima, we also have to talk about the giant sword on Elbaph. This sword feels less like a weapon and more like a monument, but I do think it might have been a real weapon used by the mighty Adam of Elbaph, for whom the Adam Tree was actually then based on. He may have been the founder of Elbaph, and society was built around his blade, which he just shoved at the trunk of the Adam Tree. Because let's face it, someone super big used that dang sword. Adam or not, some titan wielded it at some point. But the reason I think it may be a primordial figure tied to the tree itself is because of the North legend, the sword in the Branstock. This is a tale from the Volsunga saga where Odin plunges a sword into an ancient oak, declaring that a warrior worthy of it will be able to claim the blade and remove it from the tree. Which may just be the purpose of this very blade, a worthy successor of Adam or whoever it may eventually be to claim the sword promised to them through the ages. Eventually, hopefully using it to continue that warrior's fight against Emu, perhaps? I guess. And now we move on to Nika himself, who I believe may have actually been our giant harp wielder. Isn't it interesting that the sun god Apollo in Greek mythology is the guy depicted with a harp? And we've already associated Nika with the firebringer Prometheus. Apollo connects to music, the sun, and prophecy, and Nika connects to the drums of liberation, the sun, and a whole lot of prophecy. A man who brought about the end of the world with laughter and music and joy. Now let's address the harp part, because outside of its ties to Apollo, we can tie Nika to this harp through our good friend Brook. Brook, interestingly enough, strikes the Nika pose right at the beginning of our Asperia flashback, immediately connecting the sun, music, Nika, and this harp all together. But is there anything else here? Of course there is. A classic tale of Apollo, the sun god, is him slaying a serpent. He hunts down the monster serpent Python and kills it as a child, a sun god slaying a giant serpent. Ha! I knew I'd seen that before. Music and Nika do go hand in hand as well, especially because of his latest incarnation, Luffy. Luffy frickin' loves music. It's his entire jam. He wanted a musician more than anyone else on the crew, and he got Brook, an Asperian who strikes the Nika pose and spreads joy and laughter through his music. Apollo is also a real hottie, and apparently so is Luffy. I mean, the man just swoons just about every woman ever that he meets. He's got some game, even if he doesn't know it. The sun god may always have game. Something I actually think plays a lot more into Joy Boy and the concept of Romance Dawn, but I don't think ties too much into the Titans, maybe. But the Apollo connection overall is pretty sick, I think, especially if technically Nika not even is the sun god, because I kind of hate to say it, but the moon stuff, the other things tied to Nika, through Gear 5's shared visual similarities to the Ming Sulong form and the fact that the Lunarians worship Joy Boy, well, Apollo, turns out, is tied to the moon as well. Need I point out the famous moon landings in our real world are, of course, the Apollo missions? And I can even tie Apollo Nika here to trees. Remember, I think that Nika has something to do with these original giant trees on the One Piece planet, so this is actually important. Apollo's symbol is the laurel tree, tied to a story about Apollo being in love with a woman who he could not be with, and she then turned into a tree, so Apollo adopted it as a symbol. Apollo, love, and a tree. I think I'm gonna stew on this one for another video, I think. I think there might be something different, non-Titan I can pull from that as well. And actually, all of this, the Titans, their relics, I think we can go even further with how they are currently affecting the modern world and how they will inevitably return. They will meet again, because let's start with these relics and how I think they may be influencing society at large. And that ties me back to my man Moody ZZ. His comment actually had a second point that I also found really interesting. He proposed the idea that the relics left by these Titans influenced the cultures that literally surrounded them, and I think that that's absolutely sick. The Atom Tree with a giant sword shoved into its base, inspired by a story about warriors trying to prove they are worthy enough to pull it from the tree, and surrounding it, the legendary land of Elbaph, a warrior nation obsessed with honor, glory, and proving themselves worthy of a great death. The Onigashima skull and a giant katana in Wano, the land of the greatest swordsmiths in the world, known around the world for their ability to craft legendary katana. And now, Esperia, a country of music, tied to the sun god Nika by Oda's visual parallels, surrounding a massive harp that I believe may have belonged to Nika himself. It's pretty interesting, right? I think, at least. I don't know if you think that. Surely these titanic beasts had haki or maki, something of the sort. So could it be that the world was literally shaped in their image, through their will, infused into their objects? I personally think so, and I think it's pretty cool. I'm just a little bit worried about what will happen when they're set free again and take these things back for themselves. What? Free? Yeah, free. I think the Titans are gonna come back, baby. These figures feel like they will need to make an appearance at the end and climax of the story, just due to the cyclical nature of the mythology that they're based on. Ragnarok, the Bible, all these stories are all about worlds and eras ending, but then returning as the universe recreates itself. Just because the Titans were defeated doesn't mean they weren't also trapped and locked away somewhere. We've already seen shadows and souls being stolen before, and I think maybe, just maybe, I know where they might be at. Now, one option, of course, here are the giant titanic shadows we see in the Florian Triangle. There's, of course, also the giant gates of justice that are sealing something away, but also because One Piece keeps hinting at something else, an even darker place full of evil powers that Mr. Emo uses to just kill and heal everyone. A hidden layer of reality tied to darkness, souls, contracts, and devilish power. In other words, the Abyss. Which makes me wonder, what if the Abyss is not hell, but it's a prison? You know, like Tartarus, the literal place in the underworld that the Titans are imprisoned in Greek mythology. The underworld, by the way, that Brook also uses for his powers, who is from Hesperia, which has the giant titanic harp. You might remember this idea because I've pitched it before in the true purpose of the Gates of Justice video, but where it is doesn't actually matter. I think the very likelihood that the Abyss is a prison and the Titans are kept there is just totally on the table. Especially if the Forbidden Sun was part of their defeat, since I do think that the corrupted dark flames that Imu uses may be because the Abyss is tied to the Forbidden Sun. So I really hope you see my idea at this point. The souls and powers of the Titans are sealed in the Abyss, and Imu seems to draw power out of them. But if that's the case, then how do you free them? Well, Hesperia might come into play here too, because I've been talking about it a lot recently, and I'll go into way more detail about it in its own video very soon, but Tot Musica from Film Red may be the key to cracking this open. It's this extra-dimensional entity connected to music, darkness, and alternate dimension prison. That sounds extremely similar to how the Abyss may function in this scenario that I'm pitching, showing precedent in Oda's mind for this very idea. And if Oda is intentionally using Film Red as a piece of canon to foreshadow aspects of the final saga, as we know he did because he said that, then Tot Musica may have quietly introduced the idea that ancient beings can be sealed away in another realm and then partially manifested through music, emotion, or ritual. Which then brings us back all the way to Imu, because what if Imu never truly inherited the full power of the Titans? What if Imu just enslaved them? And the new dawn of One Piece may actually represent the return of the original rulers of the Blue Planet after Luffy shatters the Abyss, freeing the Titans. And two people could actually explain how this is possible. One is the current guy we're seeing the origins for right now, Brook, very conspicuous timing. Brook's powers are deeply tied to souls, death, music, and specifically the underworld. So what if Brook's role in the final saga is not simply fighting stronger enemies, but literally helping liberate the sealed Titans from the Abyss itself that he can draw his power from and maybe even venture to? His domination of souls has tied to the underworld, and it might let him fight the battle on the evil side, the abyssal side, while Luffy squares up with Big Moo in reality. But I don't know, I think he might actually be able to partake in the fight, but I do think that someone way more important will actually wage war from inside the Abyss, which is Blackbeard. His Yami Yami no Mi is a black hole, and visually it just looks like Omen and the Abyss powers and is kind of modeled after a dead star, which is a Forbidden Sun, I guess, which kind of makes me wonder if that black hole is much more like Kamui from Naruto, and instead it's like a dark gateway into the Abyss itself. For all we know, Teach may be able to live out his legacy as a Davy Clan member by destroying Imu from the inside, claiming the throne of the world, and taking the power of the Titans for himself. But what if that's just a part of him living out his role as a D-Clan member, which might just tie into one of the Titans, Dozan. Dozan, you know, the guy that Imu brought up randomly, unasked for, out of nowhere. What if Dozan is another Titan named next to Nika and Nidhogg? And better yet, what if Dozan is the name of one of the Titans that we know about? And to find that out or figure out who or what a Dozan might be, you can watch this video right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks to our fantastic Patreons who make these videos possible. If you want to support the channel, it really means a lot. Check it out in the link in the description below. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video on Tuesday, where we're gonna figure out more about Brook.